Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're diving into the fourth and final challenge tournament for now, and it's featuring the Gaellan Pact and the Ice Golem. But real quick, I do want to remind you guys that tomorrow morning, 9:30 Eastern, I will be streaming Raid on my Twitch channel. You'll find a link to it in the description box down below, and we'll be diving into the new event dungeon and testing out some strategies for some of the higher level stages, among other things. So hope to see you there. Now, the Gaellan Pact is the group of factions and honestly gets the least amount of love in the game for whatever reason. They just don't always put champions in there all the time. I guess Skinwalkers had a bit of a resurgence, but I think it's time for like Ogrins, Lizardmen, and Orcs to kind of get their time to shine. But I digress. But yes, Gaellan Pact is the Skinwalkers, Ogren tribes, Orcs, and Lizardmen, basically all of the creatures of the game. Before we dive into that, I do want to follow up on the Fire Knight tournament because I always mention this to you guys, but I guess you rarely get to see it actually in practice, practicing what I preach, so to speak. But I always talk about how, check your group, see how difficult it is, and you might be able to get some relentless gear. So this is how I performed in the Fire Knight version of this challenge tournament featuring champions from the Narisen Union. And I did say that this was probably going to be a little bit tougher in aggregate just because you kind of need really specific types of champions across those factions in order to be successful. And you can see here that, the top person did 3,600, 3,500. To me, that was a little bit too far, but I saw all these people who just kind of stopped just after 2,750. This guy went 30 over, 25 over, just barely over, right? They're kind of just barely crossing the line. And so I was like, hey, I'm just going to go out to 2,800, see if it holds, and it did. So again, 3,500 for me was too far, way too high, more the energy that I wanted to spend, but 2,800 most certainly doable with a couple extra runs, more or less, and we were able to secure third and get some potentially good relentless gear. So in terms of the Ice Golem variation of this tournament, you can see we're in a fairly similar boat. We have the outlier here all the way done at 3,000 points, so we're probably not going to chase him down, but you can see here that I'm currently in second place, and my goal will be to at least get to 2,750 and maybe push a bit further if it secures me one of the top 4 positions. I will say that this tournament will be a lot more competitive just because it's a lot easier to do the Ice Golem specifically on normal mode, and there's an abundance of champions that are applicable for the style that we're going to showcase today. But in this case, if you do want to go for it, the rewards here on the right, you have half of a primal shard, which can be very lucrative depending on where you are in your progression, and then the same 1/4 of an eternal soulstone here at 2,750. I would recommend going out there. There's not much else to be spending your energy on unless you're in the event dungeon, but of course that is up to you. Hopping over to the dungeon stages, which ones do I recommend you do? Same as always, normal mode is definitely where you want to start. Stage 25 gives you the best gear quality for normal mode. Stage 20 gives you the best bang for your buck in terms of efficiency, points per energy spent, in terms of maxing out a tournament. And then stage 16 is always more accessible. It's Void Affinity, much easier to do, and you still maintain your chance to get 6-star gear. In this case, you could venture into hard mode. I opted not to just for simplicity, but if you're running an RTAC type composition, you can definitely still work into hard mode because he's basically a solo carry for lots of teams in that faction, so he can, or in these factions, so he can definitely do that job if that's your spiel. But in this case, I'm just going to show you the team I'm going to be running for stage 25, and I only have one team prepared for you guys because, like I've mentioned, this dungeon is fairly straightforward because you can kind of just poison and burn the boss down or some combination or mixture of the two, and depending on who you have, you might be able to create a team like this or a team with even less champions if you want to run like solo duo type strategies. Anything can really work, and it kind of depends on who you have and what you want to use. So we have Python in there, positive affinity relative to the boss, so he cannot be crit, and he's the ultimate tank, so he's never going to die regardless of how many people end up dying to rogue hits against the boss. We have double HP burn activation with Gizmak and Artak, and then we have double poisons with Venom Mage and a Kemptum. Now don't freak out if you don't have the mythical champion or some of the legendaries, I get it, but the point is that you were just bringing those types of champions along. If you have Artak, you got him from the Call of the Arbiter time frame. He has HP burn and activation, so that's more than good enough. You could bring in another poisoner in that slot like a Urigrim, who we're not using in this case. We have a Kemptum, again, he's just a poisoner. He could be Urigrim, he could be some other poisoner, Venom Mage, poisoner, and poison activator. So again, you can fill up your team with a bunch of poisoners and or HP burners to do the same thing. Yes, activation will speed it up, but nonetheless, you'll get the same success rate by running any team. If you don't have a Python, it might be a little bit tougher, but you might just need to bring a little bit more support to keep people alive. Different revivers, potentially like a Broadmaw or something, someone who's tanky enough to tank some hits, or you'll just need a lot more healing, ally protection type deals, increased defense, etc. So I'll go ahead and run this team so you guys can see it in action. But again, I understand that most people won't be able to run this exact version of the team. So Gizmak, honestly, during the waves, I'm using him more as a debuffer because his decreased defense cannot be resisted as long as everyone has HP burn, which is passive places, and that can also not be resisted. So effectively, he's kind of DPS, debuffer for the waves, and I leave him in form 2. For all the poisoners on the team, we basically open, don't use with their bread and butter abilities. So Venomage opens with the poisons, doesn't use it, saves it for wave 2. Akemtum opens with the AoE Hex, so we can deal, he can apply his hits whenever poisons proc on the enemies. Unfortunate that we get the counterattack there, so it's going to be a little bit slower. But yeah, so we're saving the bread and butter abilities to be ready to go on wave 2. So here we are on to wave 2. Now we're leaving Gizmak in form 2, so our attack is coming in to place the HP burn. We didn't use that on wave 1 because it's guaranteed by Gizmak's passive, so we can kind of be a little bit efficient there. But we're rinsing and repeating. Again, we're using Akemtum's passive here to apply damage and also activate poisons when other people take poison damage. So they're kind of sharing all the damage across the team, and you can see they're basically melting themselves whenever they do get a turn. So Akemtum, super fun champion. I always love to use him if I can because his passive is so unique in the way that it works, and so it just does a lot of great things. So there we go, Gizmak smacking, laying the smackdown on the mobs there. But yeah, I think we got a little bit of bad RNG. Maybe a couple of poisons got resisted, or either Akemtum didn't like spread some of the poison, so we didn't get as maximum potential from the passive there. But again, still, you know, about 90 seconds or so to get through the waves. So now we go basically back into just tank and burn type strategy here. We get out the hexes again, we get out some poisons again, we have the HP burn, we have the HP burn activation from 2 champions, and yeah, we basically rinse and repeat the same thing. In this case, it is very likely that we're going to take hits from the boss retribution hits because we have War Master across most of the champions on the squad. We'll talk about the builds later on, but so it's fine. Again, Pythion is purposefully chosen for this wave because he is positive affinity, so he can never be crit, and he's also likely to take weak hits, and so he'll just take a lot less damage. So even if, again, if every other champion on the team dies, he will not die, so we don't really have to worry about that. But on top of that, he's also in a regen set, so he's healing himself every turn, so he's basically guaranteed to not die. There we go, 1 retribution hit, no big deal. The minions were dead, so it's not the end of the world, especially when that happens. But yeah, so I don't know, it's kind of weird, right? Because you want them alive because they're also helping me do HP burn, but you also want them dead because if he does counterattack, he does a lot of damage and ignores all your defense. So it's kind of a weird state of affairs. But nonetheless, you know, again, tank and burn type strategy here, where and plus the poisons. I do wish that we can, you know, make sure that we do get the poisons on the minions when we activate it with Venomage's A1, but, you know, RNG is always hard to gauge as far as who's going to get poisons and where. Oh, we got a bunch of poisons on that one, but yeah. Combination, HP burn activation, poison activation, and poisons. So that's all we're running. Effectively, you could say we have a debuffer in there as far as Gizmak, but we don't really have a nuker for the waves per se, aside from him. And so he could be a nuker if you want to run him that way. He could be like a Duck the Pierced if you want to run that, just to increase the damage from War Master Giant Slayer procs on the mobs. But yeah, very, very flexible team. This is just kind of a core concept of just bringing a mix of HP burn, poisons, and a little bit of survivability. So there's a lot of room to personalize this to whoever you happen to have on your roster. So for transparency, let's run through the builds on this champion so you guys understand exactly how they're building and how they're doing what they do. Starting off with Venomage, who is built primarily for Amius, so that is why her accuracy is so high, as we'll see in a second, but double perception set, and then a couple of broken pieces. 56,000 on the HP, 4.1k on the defense, 253 on the speed, and then almost 500 on the accuracy, once again, built for the Amius fight as the hero reduction champion. For the blessing, it didn't really matter. I didn't really have a good choice for her, so I just put Phantom Touch. She's not built to do damage, but it's just a little bit of extra hits here and there. That's where we kind of run with that. And then for the masteries, she used to be one of the core champions in like my old school Ice Golem team, so we're kind of bringing her back to her roots. But it's pretty standard debuffer type masteries. Offense tree hugging the left hand side, ending on War Master for the extra damage against bosses, and the support tree coming down the right hand side, ending on Sniper. You could also go Master Hexer, but her ability, her A3, I believe it's like a 3-turn hero reduction, which is actually more ideal for the Amius fight. You don't really want it to be 4 turns, otherwise it lasts for a little bit too long, and then he swaps it over to continuous heals and heals himself, which is very dangerous, as you might expect. And so I found that I didn't actually want Master Hexer on this particular version, or this use case for Venomage. Next up, we have Akemtum, who is in Lifesteal set. For those who don't know, the way his passive works is effectively whenever it procs, he deals a hit. And so he's actually getting Giant Slayer hits, he's getting Cruelty hits from the Blessing, we'll talk about that in a second, and then he's also getting Lifesteal hits, so he can heal himself a lot when his passive is proccing. So he's very, very powerful and keeps himself alive for the most part just by enemies taking damage from poisons. Granted, he can also activate the Ice Golem's passive by applying Giant Slayer hits when anyone takes poison damage, so keep that in mind. He's a little bit of a risk factor if you're running him in that way. HP or total stats, HP 50,000 there, 3.1k on the attack, 2200 on the defense, 247 on the speed, full crit rate, a little bit of crit damage, 141, and then 346 accuracy, enough to run him in like Centranos, hard mode dungeons, etc. whenever I need him. For the blessing, I already hinted at it, but cruelty, decreasing the defense of enemies. He has an AoE triple hitter and then a single target triple hitter, but again, his passive will effectively be hits every time someone takes damage from a poison while under hex or whatever. So he just basically stacks up cruelty very, very, very quickly, and is very efficient at doing so. For the masteries, fairly standard. Once again, debuff for masteries, offense tree coming down the left hand side but banking over to Giant Slayer because both of his abilities are triple hitters, of course. And then the right hand side of the support tree, you could definitely go with Master Hexer and Sniper to increase the chance of landing or placing the hex from like 75% to 80%, and then you can go for Master Hexer to extend it. But his A2 already extends the hex automatically every time, so it's like it just felt redundant, and I could just save energy not running scroll. So as long as it places it once, it will basically never fall off unless the boss is a cleansing itself or something like that. Next up, we have my Artak, who is not some sort of solo super tank Artak, but nonetheless he has a double perception and 2P stone skin for the resistance, effectively resistant set. Total stats are 85,000 on the HP, 3k on the defense, 240 on the speed, 432 on the resistance, and 352 on the accuracy. This is my Ice Golem hard build for him. He's not built to solo or to finish off the boss. That would be like a regen set, a blood shield accessory, emergency heal on the blessing, etc. But yeah, we're not running that. But he is built for the purpose of hard mode Ice Golem to fit into that composition. Cruelty on his blessing as well. I've gone back and forth on what I wanted him to end up with, but I ultimately ended on cruelty just because he has all AoEs, and so he just ends up helping decrease defense of enemies, so that's a very effective ability. But Brimstone can most certainly work as well, but again, since I primarily use him against the Ice Golem, who cleanses himself, 1-star Brimstone doesn't really do anything because he cleanses it off and it doesn't take effect. So that's why I made that change. For the masteries, different route because he is optimized for Ice Golem hard. We did not go with War Master just because we don't want to take the retribution hits as much as possible. But defense tree picking up some of the tankier stat things. Retribution also counterattack, can extend the HP burns on the A1, and then picking up as many things on the support tree as possible, but ultimately ending on Oppressor. So whenever his HP burn and or decrease attack is out there, his turn meter fill rate is a little bit higher, so he just gets more turn, in addition to his passive giving him more resistance and speed, etc. So he just runs really, really quickly through his abilities. Next up, we have my PvE Pythion, who's in a regen set, and his stats are as follows: 98,000. I really love to get that to over 100k, but I digress. On the HP, 3,500 on the defense, tanky boy, 255 on the speed, pretty quick, and then 557 on the resistance. Super high resistance, as much as I could get in a regen set, because I do use him in arena a lot as well. He doesn't resist everything, but he does resist a lot of things, and I find that's a really healthy level of that reaction accessory as well. For the blessing, arena focused here with Life Harvest, just punishing people for reviving people. They come back with less HP, making them a lot easier to kill. We are most certainly in a reviver meta, so blocking revive is obviously more useful, but if they come back and a lot of their HP is gone and they can't restore it, again, they're a lot easier to kill. For the masteries, he's definitely not a damage dealer, focusing on the support tree, coming down here to Unshakable plus more resistance, and then hugging most of the left-hand side of the defense tree, picking up all the tankiness stats, Retribution, of course, to get the counterattack with the heal, and then just taking less damage over time, and then support tree, all the healing masteries with lasting gifts, and of course Spirit Haste, because he is a reviver, so he goes a little bit faster when people are dead. And last but not least, we have my Gizmak the Terrible in Relentless and crit damage. This is also an Ice Golem build, but I do use him in a couple of other areas as well. 68k on the HP in Form 1 at least, 2600 on the defense, 267 on the speed, so very fast, full crit rate, 185 a little bit on the crit damage, and then 441 on the resistance. Now that is not enough for like arena resisting or anything like that, but it is enough for most PvE resisting, because he doesn't need any accuracy in his kit as long as he has 100% crit rate. So building him with resistance makes him good for like mischief tanking. I used to use him for that purpose and other things. He just doesn't take the hero reduction from Ice Golem and a bunch of other things in that ilk. For the blessing, I used to run Lightning Cage when I was running him in Hydra, just because he puts a bunch of buffs up and he could be a mischief tank with a Lightning Cage, but he's been more repurposed for obviously hard mode Ice Golem, but also just arena, doing what he does by placing the irresistible burn and blowing it up to get rid of stone skin. So I went with Incinerate for that niche role. And then for the mastery, these are PvE masteries, most certainly not PvP, because he's not, I mean, he can do a little bit of damage, but he's not like stacked out with crit damage and all the other stats. But offense tree coming down the left hand side, ultimately ending on War Master to deal more damage. And then the defense tree picking up a lot of the tankiness stats and then coming down here ending with retribution, because when he hits with something with the A1, he can extend the duration of HP burns, which is really useful. Or if you don't have a burn, he can decrease the duration of your buffs, which is really handy as well. So for once, when it comes to the substitutions and or other options that you could use, this is going to be a little bit more exciting because this is where you guys get to flex your creativity. I'll just go through the list of people that I could think of that I could recommend for these roles, but honestly, it's up to who you have, and a lot of champions can do a lot of these same types of things. So kicking things off with poisons and or HP burns with Ogryn Tribes, Ignatius, notable because he does have the irresistible HP burn. Granted, it's on a 5-turn cooldown, but nonetheless, he can do the work. He also has a stun on the A1 and then an AoE provoke, so he can be a little bit of CC. You can see that my team had no CC. We let the enemies take turns and do all the things, but we're taking advantage of them taking turns by putting them or stacking them out with poisons and burns. If you happen to have the faction unity champion, Vizig, he does have this ability here. We can place 2 poisons and HP burns, super powerful, but also activate them on his A1, also very powerful. So obviously he'd be super powerful for this dungeon if you happen to have him. Gerda, honorable mention because she does have a way to place poisons. Not my recommendation. I definitely don't use her. I haven't even summoned her from the portal, but I do have the fragments, but she can do some work. Coming down to the epics, Skrank is an excellent substitute. If you don't have Gizmak, for example, he does the same thing or similar things where he can place HP burn, kind of like Artak, but also does a lot of damage for the team based on HP burns being activated with his passive. So honorable mention there. And then of course Uragrim, who we didn't even showcase in this video. I didn't need him because he was a bit slower compared to other champions that I wanted to use. But Uragrim, of course, super powerful. He could duo probably with Artak, and you could blast through normal mode fairly easily. When it comes to the Lizardmen, you could obviously use Dracomorph. He is debuffer, but also has a decent chunk of poisons. Granted, he's better on like a single target, but nonetheless, he can place a bunch of poisons. Chagor would be super fun. I wish I had him, but AoE poisons, decreased defense, also the passive where he puts people to sleep, so he can count as a form of CC. But again, decreased defense and poisons, DPS combination, super powerful. Suferion, again, another champion who could be like Gizmak, who can place burns and activate them, just helps speed up your run. And then of course Venom H, we highlighted, AoE poison and also heal reduction, which makes you take a little bit less damage with her passive. Skinwalkers, I don't recommend using him, but nonetheless, he is an option. Nishak, Vermin Lord, previous fusion, where you can use him for the his bombs will turn into poisons, but typically that will fill up the debuff bar very quickly, and so you want to ensure that you have some way to guarantee or mostly guarantee that you're gonna have decreased attack out. Otherwise, it will never ever land again if he stacks them out with poison. So just keep that in mind, but he can most certainly work. And then a Kemptum for the epic is of course who we highlighted in my comp. For the orcs, I think it'd be really cool to run Tila Gormain here because of this ability. It's HP burn, but it's also some healing. Again, you know, if your team isn't susceptible to dying, it's nice to have this combination of effective DPS with the burn, but also the healing. And then she has the leech, so you can heal yourself up. Hexing allows you to do a little bit more damage, and then this also increases the duration of all HP burns, which just again allows you to do more damage over time. So she could be super fun if you happen to have her. Artak, of course, MVP for normal mode and hard mode. Ice Golem doesn't even have to be mentioned. And what also could be fun is Supreme Gaelic if you happen to have him, but he has block buffs, decreased speed, HP burn, and HP burn activation, so he could be super fun for this one as well. When it comes to debuffers, the options are a lot more limited, and honestly this role is completely optional depending on the organization of your comp. But of course Ugo would be one of the best options to use because decreased defense and block buffs does not allow any of the buffs to be placed on the enemies if you run her. Siege Hulk, powerhouse, debuffer, as well as potential DPS if you want to build him that way, can be super effective. For the Lizardmen, Roxum, don't recommend, but technically speaking, he does have decreased defense and weaken on a 4-turn cooldown provided he's under a veil. Very finicky with his abilities, but nonetheless, again, he can do the job. Dracomorph, we already kind of mentioned. And then Vergumkar, honorable mention, he does have AoE decreased defense, one of the few in the faction to do it. For the Skinwalkers, honestly, it's very slim pickings, and I don't recommend picking from this particular faction if you're looking to go that route. But nonetheless, Ragash does have AoE decreased defense if you happen to have him. And then the only other option is actually a rare Fleshmonger, but it's not 100% chance to land. It's on a 4-turn cooldown. So I definitely use him for like secret rooms, but I would not whip him out for this particular instance. And then for the orcs, you have a couple of options. If you have been doing your Doom Tower hard secret rooms, you will have Gomlock. It's granted 4-turn cooldown, but nonetheless decreased defense and weaken. And then for the epics, of course, Duck the Pierced and Zorgala. For the supports, it's kind of an interesting category because it's what you want to make of it. If you need more healing, then bring healers. If you need revivers, bring a reviver. If you need protectors, bring protectors. So it's kind of what you want to do. So I'll just throw out a couple of names here per faction that might be helpful depending on your needs. Kurgar Deathbell, ally protection and strengthen. Again, again, taking less damage or taking damage on behalf of people on your team. Shamrock, he has Revive on Death, which can be a little bit of a failsafe, but also some turn meter manipulation, which is useful. Bellatar, Mage Slayer, is another reviver, but he also does some other stuff. Honorable mention to Grush, who is kind of a DPS slash healer with the continuous heals on one of his abilities, decrease attack potential as well, and I think on the A2, leech on the A1. So powerhouse champion, but he can be DPS and healing support at the same time. And then super honorable mention to Bellower, of course. If you're more early on in the game, put him in a stun set, AoE on every single ability, put Nature's Bounty on him as well to make his small version debuffs big version debuffs, and you'll have a super powerful rare on your hands. For the Lizardmen, of course, Python, MVP of my team as far as keeping them alive, but also Nekomothar can be good. If you have the decreased speed and leech, you just take more turns, and you can also heal up, when you're dealing with the boss. Krisk, of course, enough said just by mentioning his name, ally protection and the debuffing capabilities. Jereg is super powerful, increased defense, ally protection, but also is passive that provides a significant amount of continuous heals when you take damage, which can basically bring you back to full HP, more or less. I haven't really seen him used in this way, but definitely Aox can be kind of the way people use him in the Iron Twins, where as long as he's taking damage from the boss, and he also provides decreased attack and decreased crit rate, I believe, but as long as he's taking damage from the boss, he's going to extend the duration of poisons on the boss, assuming they're on, and so he can kind of probably be one of those solo duo type champions. I haven't seen it, but I definitely think he could do the job. And then Broadmaw, Reviver if you need it, Scalix, Cleanser, and a little bit of a shield for protection, also preventing the heal reduction, decreased defense, freezes, etc. For the Skinwalkers, Hackhorn, Smash Lord, fresh off of his buff, also has the 3-turn cooldown, full cleanse, and a massive heal on the ability, so again, protecting or not healing your team, keeping them alive. Snick Track, same thing, is kind of a Krisk type kit where ally protection, shielding, again, reducing the damage that your team is taking. And then honorable mention to Mighty Uko, decreased attack on his A1, a very high land rate, but also the potential to revive, and then strip the buffs off the waves, off the mobs, and then also place block buffs, same thing kind of like Ugo, preventing the increased defense from the Seekers, for example. And then lastly, for the Orcs, honorable mention to Angar. A lot of people probably won't have him, he's the Void Legendary, but he does have a really reliable provoke capability nowadays. Rakavaltide, another Void Legendary, but again, if you happen to have her, super solid support champion, lots of healing, cleansing, and a potential to revive if people die. And then for the epics, you have Jorg as a reviver, you have Tagore as a healer and a reviver, and then you also have Rask as a pretty solid healer. And of course, I'd be remiss if I did mention that yes, you can most certainly run Seer. She is an orc, so if you have a super powerful Seer that doesn't need that many buffs, or you could pair her with some other champions in this faction that do have buffs, you can most certainly still run your Seer to blow up the waves and then solo duo whatever you want to do with the boss. So there you have it. That's my team for this Ice Golem tournament. As we highlighted, there are plenty of other options or champions that you can use to do this in various ways with poison, HP burn, and or wave clearing abilities. So once again, do let me know in the comment section down below if you're going to be participating in this particular iteration of the challenge tournament, and let me know what your team is going to be. Hopefully you do get an easy group, and as always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.